Fulbright.
Welcome everybody to the second annual Fulbright Academy Film Festival. This festival is in Heidelberg, Germany in March 2011. We have several films that we're going to be highlighting which were made by Fulbright alumni and Fulbright grantees. Since this year's conference relates to social sciences, I've chosen a couple different films that relate to social sciences in one way or another. As a matinee, we have a rather humorous film called The Dump. The Dump. It's about interpersonal relations. You enjoy the dialogue? The first sort of official film is about Venezuela.
6 Millionen Einwohner zählt Caracas, die Hauptstadt Venezuelas.
There's Mark again.
The artists announced the launch of a new internet service.
So, questions for Floriano about his film, his video. I said both of these are similar in that they're not really entertainment, they're more informational, presenting information to a viewer. So.
Have they gotten, in the 4 years since, more interested in defending trademarks?
Sure. That's, by the way, just the first part of the documentary. In fact, the whole thing runs for about 1 hour. And since we had this limit here of 30 minutes, I just brought here the very introductory and general part of it. So in the second part, you're going to get more in-depth discussion about this issue you were asking about the other issues regarding new technologies in the area, the connections between this, digital TV, and telecommunications. So the answer is yes, including the Japanese parliament, who got involved directly with this whole set of new policies. But this was very recent then. I think these new policies, national policies in this sector really started in the first half of 2000, yes, the year. In the decade of 2000.
Earlier you said that you learned a great deal from doing this and there were things that you would do differently if you were to do it again.
Right.
Well, now that we've seen it, can you tell us what you think you would have done differently if
Yeah.
you did it now?
For one thing, I would have saved the original project because I had to re-edit this and dub this into English out of the version that was broadcast on TV. So one thing I would have done differently would be to save the original project and then add subtitles without needing to put that black bar on the top, because I put that black bar, for example, because there was Portuguese characters behind or the positioning of credits. Also, I wouldn't have done that back and forth changing that we saw there. So I would have done that differently. So those are small things This was made for a Portuguese-speaking audience originally. So I recorded the voiceover in English myself, once to save money, and two, also to have this experience of having this documentary narrated and partially in English by me, because I see this also as an opportunity for future possibilities for the English market.
It is all about Japan's repositioning themselves as technology leaders. I didn't see that you have interviewed any of the people from the industry like Nintendo. Is it later in the documentary that you have interviews with them too?
Right. Well, one thing is that all these companies are pretty much connected to each other. So one of the company people I interviewed with was the Sony guy. I think he appeared once or twice. He appears many more times in the second part.
Okay.
There are 2 or 3 more industry people in the second part. As I told you, this was the very introductory part of the whole documentary. But it wouldn't surprise me if this Nintendo game became another hit in the market.
It's the PlayStation itself.
Yeah, it's not Nintendo, it's PlayStation. Because PlayStation is by Sony.
Right, it's the
Yeah.
Wii. I'm too tired.
No, but Nintendo did release a new product
Right.
for the 3D
Right.
market,
and it
animation
wasn't
and
a game.
games.
It was the actual player.
Right.
And the analysis, the technology analysis that was provided said that it wasn't about the development of the content itself that was supported by 3D technology, but rather the showcase that they did by releasing that is to position the whole country once again as a technology leader in terms of all use of 3D technology.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, because this is a huge fight involving different sets of industrial sectors. So electronics.
It's establishing standards, it's everything. Yeah.
Exactly. Standards. I talk about standards in the second part of the documentary. Intellectual property rights, I just started talking about this here, and it goes on in the second part. So electronics, politics, negotiations, and not only in the WTO, but also there is a whole institution in Geneva called WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization, that was established to discuss these issues. There are other multilateral institutions such as the United Nations Trade and Development Agency that also discusses these issues.
Yeah, but my question is, did you feel from your interviews, which we didn't see all of them, that the Japanese are preparing themselves again to be leaders? Because there are, in the parts you showed us, they were kind of holding back.
That's their intention, but then the competition especially with the Chinese, is really tough. And this was shot in 2007. So what I tried to show there also, maybe I didn't have enough time, was this link between this kind of industry and the overall economy. So since the Japanese economy is growing so fast, this will have certainly, and is already having an impact on this specific sector. But the Japanese are trying hard. These latest events are certainly gonna bring a problem in this industry as well. Yeah.
I'd like to bring us back to film and cinematography as an art form. And can either of you talk for a minute about how you come up with the topics that you choose? So again, if you're talking to an author of a book, he sometimes or she sometimes has a particular thing that gets them going on the topic of their book or the topic of their play. Or if you listen to country music, it's all about the horrible husband or your bad wife. What is it that you have as an inspiration for making your films, especially if they don't always necessarily are making you money?
First of all, I guess they have to touch the filmmaker as a first point. So he's kind of develops some kind of passion for the story.
My approach was more pragmatical in terms of putting together opportunity and a strategic sector, in my view, the same way I did when I applied for the Fulbright fellowship. That was a congressional fellowship, so I had to find a project line that was not only interesting for me, but also for the guys who would read my application papers. So I came out with this idea of analyzing the policy making in the Congress, in the US Congress, regarding energy and the environment, the trade policy making in that area. So I had to try to put together interests from both sides. In this case here, as I was seeking a grant from the Japan Foundation and from other foundations as well, I had to find a topic that would interest them and also that would interest me. So this kind of topic was something that I had studied before when I was in taking another fellowship in Oxford, UK. So that time I was researching the production and trade of global content, or global trade of digital content, rather. So this was a continuation of that research for me. Yes, there is one question.
Do you know Japanese?
Yeah, that's another interesting point for me in this documentary, because my understanding of Japanese is good enough to grab the general context of what the person is saying. So what I did there, as I didn't have many resources in terms of translators, I would ask the question in English. My subject would reply to me in Japanese. I would understand in broad terms what the person was saying. Then I would ask the next question in English, following his thoughts.
And so I'm assuming it's the same thing for you, right? Do you know Spanish?
Yeah, we were a team of 3 people, and 2 of us were able to talk Spanish.
Okay, so even if you're able to talk, right, I wonder how much is lost in the translation, and not just the linguistic point of view, but rather the cultural perception of the phenomena.
That is our perspective, and it is meant to be our perspective on that phenomenon, and it's meant to be our perspective for, mainly in this case, a German audience, to get that across, what we perceive to be the important thing of this project or this system, and that is what we want to communicate by this film. I think a Venezuelan filmmaker would have made it completely different, or could have made it completely different, and could have emphasized other things. It's also a point of the background of each filmmaker, not only the cultural background, but the personal background, from what background he originated and what his ideas are, what he wants to talk about. So that influences the film.
Yeah, I think the background part is very important. It does matter. However, I think in my case, the fact that I had lived and studied in Japan made a difference in terms of me already knowing how they thought more or less, and that certainly influenced in the way I asked other questions or the reactions I had to some of their thoughts. Certainly, if I didn't know the language at all, it would be a whole different story, and I wouldn't be collecting, I think, so rich material, I think, as I did in terms of understanding their thoughts and expressing not only my perspective of the problem, but also their own perspective.
Just out of interest, how well are the animes and mangas received in Brazil, disregarding the big share, the big Japanese population there? Because I know in Europe, many people like it, and it's actually many studies started getting Japanese out of this interest. So it's some sort of soft power already.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the power of Japanese animation is strong not only among Japanese descendants, many of them don't even speak Japanese anymore, but also among other normally younger generations who don't necessarily speak Japanese, but are pretty much connected to this language, to maybe the power they feel from watching these animations and even dressing themselves with the clothes of their heroes. So it's pretty much alive there. And I believe it's also strong in other countries as well. It's not something typical in Brazil just because we have this huge Japanese population there, I believe.
Thank you very much.